I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with arranger, producer, songwriter, virtuoso fretless guitar player, Tom Fountainhead Geldschla, who last month put out his first album, in a way, at least under the name Changeling, on Season of Mist Records. But this progressive metal album is essentially a continuation of Tom's long-running Fountainhead project, just under a new name. And this is, it's definitely, it is true to say that this album was a labor of love for Tom. It was several years in the making, as we discussed quite early on in the interview. Even at the point that it seemed like the album was almost finished, there was then more work that had to be done. So this was a major undertaking in terms of time, energy, money, and the results are impressive. It is, as I discussed with Tom, a kind of all-consuming, all-enveloping world of an album that, I feel like I have to have a pause afterwards and kind of absorb before I move on to something else. And as well as getting into some of how Tom put the album together in terms of the playing and the production and the different instrumentation, we do also discuss how it was that Tom first came to explore playing the fretless guitar. And you know, one of the things that one of the aspects that we talk about is sort of the way in which having a very kind of unique approach to your instrument can really be a way that you express your creative personality. And in a funny little side note that sort of, I don't know if it exactly exemplifies that, but it sort of expands on that. Tom also has a YouTube channel, Fountainhead TV, where amongst other things, you can find him reworking various different songs on the fretless guitar, not to necessarily recreate the guitar parts, but the vocal parts on his guitar. So for example, if you would like to see and listen to Into You by Ariana Grande, reimagined by Tom on guitar, you can do that. And I would suggest that you do so. Ariana Grande is like a little bit of a guilty pleasure for me. And I very much enjoyed Tom's fretless guitar version of that, as well as talking about his own music. Something that was particularly fascinating for me, and I think has expanded the range of sort of, music world topics that I'm going to discuss with people in the future, was talking about the idea of unionization of musicians. It's something that I don't think I've discussed with anyone before, and Tom had a very interesting take on that. So it's definitely given me food for thought and ideas of what I want to talk with people about in the future. And there was more, but it's just coming up to 10 o'clock in the morning here on Friday, on the day that I'm planning to post this episode. I am leaving things slightly close to the wire, so I'm going to stop babbling on. I'm going to post this thing. You can go check out the album on Bandcamp if you'd like to listen to it. You can get it on the streaming services as well, and you can buy in double vinyl from Season of Mist. They have web stores in the US, well, in North America, and also in Europe too. You can go follow Tom at Tom Fountainhead Geldschla on Facebook. I believe you will find him as Tom Fountainhead on Instagram. I think he said he's on TikTok as well, but I'm not, so I cannot confirm or deny how he appears there. If you go to Tom's Facebook page, you'll have a link tree to everything you could possibly want, merch store, Bandcamp, etc., etc. You can, in fact, go to Tom's website, which is thefountainhead.de. He did say in the interview that it wasn't necessarily the most maintained part, but you can definitely get a link to everything from his Facebook page, for example. And if you would like to follow me, you can do so at Tom Osman Sounds. You can check out my music and writings about it and such things at tomosmansounds.com. I'm going to run the Edinburgh Marathon in 2 days. I hope I survive. I am going to play a track from Changeling at the end of the episode, with a little clip coming up in just a second. And with that being said, Tom, Fountainhead, Geldschla of Changeling, take it away. Like you might be in either a practice, rehearsal, or a recording space, or a combination of the three.
Yeah, correct. So this is the back side of my home studio. In front of me are speakers and studio rack things, knobs to twiddle and guitars to this side, keyboards to this side. So yeah.
So how long have you had this set up for?
This one I moved into this space at the very beginning of the pandemic, like 2 months before the pandemic started.
Okay.
I had a separate studio room before that, so
Mm.
living situation and then studio room, and then I built out basically one of the rooms of my apartment into a permanent studio just before the pandemic, which basically saved my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have known how to make anything happen during that time.
Right. So it wasn't that you made it because of COVID, but it was just a lucky coincidence that it was there
Yeah,
when COVID came.
yeah, for sure. And I had been searching for a new place where I could build a new studio room for 3.5 years straight because the living situation, like housing situation here in Berlin, is just
Yeah.
insanity by this point. It's like New York standards. And so, yeah, that was a very lucky coincidence that I found this place, moved in, then the pandemic hit. And then basically the reason that we're talking, Changeling, the album,
Yes.
is was basically conceived and recorded and written in this room.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
And so when were you recording the album? Like, what was the period of time of the making of the album?
Honestly, it's been such a long time that it feels like I've always recorded this album. I've never stopped recording this album. And to take you on a little tangent, like I thought the album was done after all this time, and the
Mm.
short answer is like 4 to 5 years, give or take, all in all.
Okay.
And then I thought it was done. Release date is finished. The stereo version is finished. Promo promo activities have already started, and then I get started on the spatial audio Atmos mix, and then first thing I find out is that it doesn't work the way that I need it to work, and the only solution is to go back, relearn the entire thing, and re-record every little note of rhythm guitar on the entire album for the Atmos mix. So I think I finished recording those quad tracks 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Right up to the wire.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
never done. This is a Moby Dick type situation.
I understand. Und ich soll auch sagen, ich habe auch in Berlin gelebt, aber
Wirklich
ja, vor ein paar Jahren und nicht lange. Yeah, there we go. That's when I'm talking to someone
impressive.
German, I like to speak just a little bit of German, but it can only go so far. Unfortunately, my level is not sophisticated enough for talking about music.
That's totally fine, but it really took me by surprise. So, what are your impressions that you took from Berlin?
Oh, do you know, it was really interesting for me. I lived next to Mauer Park,
Yeah.
right next to where, one of the parts where the wall was. So I was just on the east side, so, opposite the wall from Mauer Park. And even though I moved during the pandemic, so, oh, actually, no, sort of, well, kind of after, but not like right in the middle of it. But at this point, I was doing almost everything online. Well, actually, no, that's not quite true. I had some classes that were in Berlin, but I was doing a lot of stuff online. But whenever I went out of the house, I'd cross the line of where the wall was, and that
Well,
was kind of psychologically quite interesting
mm,
to have that reminder all that time. Obviously there's a lot of history in Berlin. Not all of it is good history, but it feels like a city that has Like there's a weight of atmosphere to it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a place full of generational trauma.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah, and
And
I'm an East German. I was born in the East, not in Berlin, and so East Germany definitely has like an added layer of trauma
yeah,
compared to the West, for sure.
so I'm trying to think. So I was about 8, I think, when the Berlin Wall came down. So do you
Mhm.
have memories of the separation of East and West Germany?
Only from watching TV with my parents and my parents freaking out and basically trying to explain the situation to me. I was 6 at that time. And then I have very vague memories of standing in line for something that was connected to the fall of the wall.
Mm,
But yeah, it was I was young enough so that the whole thing just went right over my head.
yeah.
But what I do have, and this is connected to what I'm saying about East Germany carrying an extra layer of trauma, what I do remember very vividly is the 90s and the great Eastern Depression of the 90s and
Mm,
refugee camps burning in close proximity and family members joining the Nazi party and
wow.
all the chaos and the violence. I remember being chased through the bushes with baseball bats because of my long hair.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the kinds of experiences that will cultivate an impressionable mind that wants to listen to death metal.
That was a really good segue. I guess so.
And
Yeah, but you're not wrong. I mean, death metal at its heart is very escapist music, is it not?
yeah, I think there's probably some truth in that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, I'm kind of curious in general when people are drawn towards dark music, whatever it may be, and I'm one of those people.
Mhm.
I do ask myself from time to time, like, what is it psychologically that makes people gravitate toward this music? Where does the
That's one of my
darkness come
favorite
from?
questions as well. That's a very good question. Yeah.
So what kind of conclusions have you reached for yourself? If that's not too deep a question to jump into right at the beginning.
Not in the least. Not in the least. It's like I really enjoyed this interview already. Psychology and like the connections between words, actions, and motivations being one of my favorite subjects in the world. So for myself, I think really it was a means of escaping very. I don't want to say harsh surroundings because that would do a disservice to people who grew up in way harsher surroundings than I did. But
Yeah.
I didn't have a particularly happy childhood, and I now, after PTSD diagnosis a couple of years ago, I now recognize the different layers of trauma that I'm carrying. I've been trying to work on and pull into the light more and more. And I
Mm,
think I didn't know at that time, as a kid and as a teenager, why music to me was the most important thing in the world. And it felt like the most important thing. And it felt extremely transcendental to just uh, discover a new album, discover a new band, and then just take that journey and like take a deep plunge into that musical world that they were building and just completely immerse myself in whatever album I was into at the time that felt transcendental, felt like the most transformative thing I could possibly find way before I began to experiment with drugs or anything else. And I think
relatable.
looking back now, the reason was that I never felt really belonging to the world that I was living in. I always felt like an outsider, never was bullied at school, never really had many friends growing up, and just never felt that I fit in. But
Mm,
then when the proverbial needle hit the vinyl, then the worlds were opening up that I could relate to a lot more, a lot deeper, I think.
yeah, you found worlds that you could relate to more.
Yeah, that's true. And for better or worse, that set me on the path of wanting to create those worlds. And
Yeah.
here we are for that reason, right? So I think it's a very straight linear progression in that sense.
Yeah, that's a very cool insight. And I definitely want to get back into talking about some of your other musical projects over the years. But if we talk a bit about Changeling and
Yeah,
your debut self-titled record, which is at the time of this interview coming out just a week away.
right.
Apart from, the easy thing of saying, oh, well, it's progressive death metal, because that's what's in the press release. And,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can understand why. I think for me, listening to the album, it's like a kind of, there's an epicness to it. And I would also say, in a way, it's kind of like a sonic barrage. Like I feel by the end of it, like, whoa, that was an experience. I need to have a rest. Like, I can't just go like, oh, I finished the last track. I'm just going to go listen to something else now. Like, I kind of need to have a pause and no music for a bit and let it settle. It is a very powerful, yeah, sonically, almost, I don't necessarily say overwhelming, but it is like, it is a lot sonically that's going on.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was thinking, just like an incidental point, it'd be great to hear this music live. Is Changeling going to be a touring project, or are you thinking of this as being exclusively a studio project?
Well, first of all, thank you for that, for those observations, because that is really the situation and the reaction that I'm trying to write for. Not necessarily to overwhelm people, but to give people who are open to what I do an experience unlike any other. Just like you're going to the movies and you're seeing a movie that really expands your perception of reality and takes you through the ringer and puts you on the journey, right? And then by the end of it, you have to pause a little bit and you have to make sense of what you just saw and heard, and you have to think about the experience. So that's really also the intention behind me putting out this 60-minute behemoth of sound. So that, yeah, I can very much relate to your reaction to it, and that's intentional. Now, as for the touring thing, the easy answer is yes. The more complicated answer is, well, we have to kind of talk about the fact that Changeling is not a debut record at all. It's just simply a different name for what I've been doing for the past 20 years in different ways. And so I am already also a touring outfit and a touring musician with many bands, obviously, that I played for, but also, for example, I had a solo headlining tour of India 2 years ago, where I already played Changeling material. But now that the record is coming out, we have a dedicated project name for it, which is something that the label brought into the picture, because during the production time, I simply thought of, or we all thought of it as the next Fountainhead solo album.
Yeah, that was going to be
Which
my
would be
question. So
number
like
three.
so when you were playing it in India, you were playing it as Fountainhead.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so now it's not that anymore. And I can 100% understand why people then view it as a debut album, which has advantages and disadvantages. Right. For example, like it's this weird situation where I have seen a bunch of reviews hailing it as a masterpiece, but then giving it very low, like a considerably low rating. Like I read a review the other day, literally in the title, it's like progressive death metal masterpiece. And then it's like 5 out of 7. Okay. And that's very much one of the fallouts of being a new name. That's people just don't take you seriously.
Interesting.
Very odd place to be in. But to get back to the original question, so I am touring. I'm playing 2 shows, also playing Changeling material next week. For example, for the release, 1 show here in Berlin and 1 show in Poland. And then we just have to figure out as we go along how to get the people on the album, like the lineup from the album, on stage with me and play a tour or festival shows, because that's a whole nother thing, right? Because long story short, I have, like, what I do has been basically ignored by the wider media for the past decade. So I've always just done what I've done, and I've done all these different things regardless. But then without that support, it's very difficult to put on a proper tour. And I know that the audience is there. I had 250 people for a solo show where it's just me on stage, in the middle of India.
Yeah.
And then you still try to make people aware, hey, listen, I've got this album and it has this awesome lineup. And we want to do this as a touring entity. Like, we want to be there and we want to play this music the way that you hear it on the album. The only thing we need is some support and some belief and money, and that's where it gets difficult. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but
No, it's all
short
good.
answer, yes, we want to. How? I don't know yet. For now, I'm playing this with my trio.
Yeah.
So it's me, my bass player Ruven, and my drummer Phoenix playing Changeling material, playing material that I've written for Obscura, playing stuff for my first solo albums, just making it a whole journey.
So you were, I'm not quite sure how to characterize this. You were briefly like a guest member, or you were
No,
official member?
I was a member of the band in 2015 to 2016.
Okay, you were.
And I co-wrote and recorded the Akrasis album.
Yes, and the track Weltseele is a kind of companion piece to Anathema, the last track on the current album. Loosely connected somehow.
You could say that. So yeah, I wrote the song Weltseele, which is the 15-minute song on the Akrasis album. So that is the one song on the album where I had almost complete creative control.
Yeah.
And it's also just me playing all the guitar instruments
Okay.
on that track. So it always felt like a Fountainhead track anyway. And it's despite, the lead singer of that band having written the lyrics and coined the terms, like musically, it was always just a thing that was coming very much from myself rather than from the band. So, and I think people recognize that, I recognize that, and it's always just been a little bit separate from the band's output for many different reasons.
Yeah.
And so going into Changeling, I really felt like I wanted to write a sequel to that. And I think it's been a long time coming, and I think I'm at my best writing in a long form style, and so it just made sense to go there this time again.
Yeah, I think like it is possibly the most impactful track of the whole album, and obviously it's the closer as well, and it is this kind of, I forget exactly how long it is, about 19 minutes long, and so it has
not quite. I think it's 17. Yeah.
Okay, I slightly exaggerated.
Yeah,
But,
no, there was a point when it was about 20 minutes long, and then I cut it down, cut a bunch of unnecessary fat, so it kind of evolved over time into the 17 minutes that are left.
So I was thinking, also kind of touched on by you in terms of the lineup on the album. So you have all these different guest musicians. You've got a 50-piece orchestra as well in there, I think, in certain places. So I was thinking, I was already interested to sort of understand a bit about the practicalities of how you put all of this together, being as you are the composer, the arranger, the producer. You recorded this. And I was thinking, well, Anathema is kind of an interesting track to take because it is the biggest in scope. That might be kind of a good track to use as a sort of representation. So can you tell us a bit about how you put that track together?
For sure. Well, it's difficult to put that into words because it's made up of so many different decisions and sessions and just things coming together over a long period of time. But yeah, in general, I wrote the whole of the music, and I demoed the whole of the music right here in this room over a long period of time. And that means I programmed everything, wrote out every note of drums, bass, guitars, and also for the orchestra. And it's not what I were to play you that original demo, it's obviously a far cry from what you now hear on the album, because I tend to be very perfectionistic about a lot of things. But when I'm in the songwriting process, also I'm very comfortable just making very rough demos. So like for the orchestra, sometimes it's just a keyboard pad. Okay, orchestra here, duh. And then vocals will be, and it sounds silly then to a point, but that's what I do for a long period of time until I get the structuring of the piece to flow in a way that even in this rough demo form with silly bullshit vocals and none of the details really worked out of the orchestration, I get the goosebumps. If I can do that for myself, if I can build a structure that's so compelling that I myself feel like I want to listen to it over and over again, and I like what it's doing to myself, then I take it to the next stage. And then over the demo, Mike recorded his drums, which was a great starting point in the way that he, like for that song specifically, he basically copied what I wrote in terms of the drum parts and embellished it and just performed it with his amazing abilities. But he did bring one thing to the table, which was very, very important, which is that he took the different parts and he decided which part from the song originally being one tempo, which part is going to speed up a little, which part is going to be slowing down. So he made a more dynamic structure out of it, which is his main contribution to the album, I think.
Does that then imply that you don't do any playing along to a click track?
Oh, no, there's definitely playing along to the click track, but then when he went in and recorded his drums, he would basically decide that this part feels better if it's just 1 BPM faster.
Okay.
So let me reprogram the click to that. And then for the next one, we're going to bring it down 2 BPM, but the click will still be the guy. I don't think you can really pull off an album like that not playing to a click. It's like one of the main concepts for the album was not to edit things to a grid. So the drum performance, the bass performance, the guitar performance, and the vocals, none of it is edited to a click and to the grid, sorry. But beyond that, I don't think you can pull off something with that complexity without having the aid of a click guiding you through it.
Yeah. I mean, are you thinking as well for like adding in the other instrumentation to be able to drop where it should go in?
Yeah, absolutely. And also just for me, because I work with structure way more than anything else. So for me to be able to just, based on the click, take 4 bars here and move them around and just try it out for feels, how to improve the structure, make it more compelling. Working within a click scenario makes that so much easier.
Yeah.
On the process of that song, then once we had the final tempos, then I recorded my final guitars on top of Mike's drums and replaced my demo guitars. And then from that point on, it really became solid in the way that, okay, this is what it is. Now let's shop for guest musicians and see how the whole thing evolves. Let's work on the orchestration. Let's see what kind of orchestral instruments I'm envisioning. How do we make this happen? So it's a long process, basically just trying to get people together, writing the parts out more and more, making more elaborate demos, receiving performances, then based on those performances, tweaking things on, and so it just becomes quite a complicated process until it's done. Until it's in the mixing stage. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Explaining it. Okay.
So like from that point of view of all of this additional instrumentation that you put in, would it be kind of the right way to characterize it that, when you're putting your demos together, you had sort of a rough idea of the kind of tones you're wanting, but you didn't specifically say like, I want to have a Wagnerian tube over here, for example?
I did very specifically say that. Okay, it's a bit complicated to explain, and it would be so much easier if I could say, it is this and done for the rest of the album. But it's complicated. It's like I'm very interested in orchestration of all kinds, and I've become an orchestrator myself, other artists over the years. So the album. One of the concepts is that we have a sonic signature for the entire album, which you can clearly hear, and also through the band lineup that plays on the entire thing. But then I wanted different kinds of orchestration for every track, giving each an even more individual, unique feel. Because the album conceptually is also a journey from the past into the future. And so on that journey, I wanted to have these different flavors to each track that illustrate that journey. And so what happens really is that you have these different kinds of orchestration on each track. And then on the final track, Anathema, they all come together. So to be able to do that, I needed a lot of help because I've spent some time as an orchestrator. I'm learning the craft, and I have awesome people in my life helping me with that. But I I wouldn't have been able to exactly write out everything the way that you hear it on the album. And so a lot of stuff is me orchestrating. And then other stuff, like the final 2 tracks, which have the biggest orchestral impact on application, it's my long-term orchestral collaborator, Matthias Preisinger, who also worked with me on Weltseele back in the day. So that's him orchestrating the lines and the parts that I had written. So the whole song is written out. It's all in demo form, and I know exactly what I want. But then how that is, like, is this line, are we putting it in the flutes, or are we using not a flute, but maybe like a piccolo flute, or are we putting it in the clarinet maybe? So very specific decisions about that. That's all him. And then honestly, just saying that feels like I'm doing this disservice to what he's brought to the table, because there's so much more that goes into making this. And I think this is a piece where I went all out on my ideas, but he also brought something unbelievable to the table. And then the same happened with Phoenix, who now also plays drums in my trio for Anathema. Same process. I have very elaborate demos. I know exactly what I want, but I need somebody else to quality-wise get me there and like make these little decisions based on range and instrument timbre and how an orchestra works that I don't have the knowledge and the capacity to do so yet.
No, that's all very interesting insights.
Yeah. And so straight up, the people orchestrating with me on this album, they are very responsible for a lot of the great moments, just as I am. Like, it's kind of a slippery slope. You want to not give away what you've done in terms like, yeah, I take full credit because I've written everything. Yeah. But at the same time, you also at no point want to downplay what any of these players brought to the album, because the album wouldn't be the way it is without them. Like, it's both. It has to be both.
Yeah. Well, the orchestration definitely is a significant part of the album, but also significant is your guitar playing. And I wanted to talk about that as well, because you are, I think, quite well known for being a proponent of fretless guitar, which even just the thought of to me is terrifying, because I'm like, fretless bass is complicated enough, but fretless guitar.
Are you a bass player first?
No, I'm a guitar player first, but not at any kind of like, pretty rudimentary, relatively speaking. But I play a little bit of bass, but not fretless. So,
but have you tried playing? So you've dabbled in playing fretless?
I had a band years ago where the first bass player disappeared and the second bass player came in. He was actually a guitarist, but he had a fretless bass and he wanted to play the fretless bass, so he came into our band playing fretless bass. And I fiddled around on it a bit, and I thought, this is really cool, but I definitely would have needed more time to get to grips with it. Right. So I'm interested just in general because your guitar playing is at a level that's kind of inconceivable for me. So I'm curious when I talk to people who are really highly skilled in instruments to have an understanding of how they got to that point. But I'm also particularly interested to know how you got into fretless guitars and how that became one of the things that you were most focused on.
Well, how I got into this is a funny story that I've been telling a bunch. But first, behold the Skull Cup.
I like it. Is this like a kind of a Mexican sort of Day of the Dead type thing?
Exactly. Yeah, I brought it from Mexico earlier this year, and I am happily drinking all my beverages from it now.
Nice. I like it. It deserves to be represented.
So yeah, it's very easy to tell the story because I was young. I had my first band, and we were playing our first shows around town. And I had a cheap Steve Vai, and I wanted to be Steve Vai, growing up, and then had this cheapest signature model of his. Did a bunch of whammy bar abuse, as you tend to do if you want to be Steve Vai, but you're not, certainly. And so the whole thing just exploded into my face on stage. It just broke the whammy bar. Not sure if it was a fault of the model or if I was just being too rude to the guitar, but it's like, pew. And so gig is over and I don't have a guitar anymore, a functioning one. So being a teenager and also not particularly in an economically comfortable situation in my family, in the 90s in East Germany, yeah, you just can't go out and say, okay, well, I'm just going to get myself a quality guitar. No, you just have to make do. So I thought about what to do. And there was a guy in town who was on the side building and repairing guitars. So I just brought the corpse of this guitar to him and it's like, hey, what can we do to fix it? He's like, yeah, well, we can put this and this and this and fix bridge. And then, but like, don't think that you're going to be playing this as your main instrument. Just look out for another guitar and just make this an experiment, so to speak. So I was thinking, what could I do with this guitar? MIDI, maybe a MIDI pickup? Nah, that's too expensive. And I had had a few, like 3 or 4 lessons with a local dude who was a jazz guy, and he had a MIDI pickup, and I still have traumatic memories of sitting there wanting to learn while he was doing flute solos. So I was like, no, that's not happening. No. I don't want to be this guy. No shade to him, great player, but like sitting there as a rock guy and wanting to learn some cool shit, and then he's like, like, no, this is wrong. So, and that was the early days of the internet, right? And I had just discovered a bunch of really exciting guitar players online on my own for the first time, which felt like, oh, that's mine. That's my little discoveries. Nobody else knows about this, right? One of them being a guitar player called Ron Tal, or AKA Bumblefoot, who then ended up playing in Guns N' Roses at some point.
Interesting. Who makes his own guitars?
Well, he did at that point. Not anymore, I don't think. But
Okay.
back in the day, he had the Swiss cheese guitar, which he made himself, and he had just started. So, little side tangent: my dad had a vinyl record shop at that time, and so through the shop, I got my hands on all sorts of cool underground music because I could just order stuff that I have read about through my dad's shop. And so it's like, Bumblefoot, okay, he just self-released this little album where he plays fretless guitar. Dad, can you get it from me? And so he gets it from somewhere. And yeah, so just at the moment when he's trying his hand at fretless guitar first, I have this broken guitar and I'm bringing this album to this guy with the remains of this guitar. And it's like, okay, do this. And it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess so if you want to. And then 2 weeks later, I had a fretless guitar.
Okay, so it's a bit kind of serendipity. It was just the things lined up in that moment
for
that
sure
made that your choice.
Yeah, it could have been something else completely. And as these things tend to do, then you get interested in what this instrument can do, especially if you don't have a choice, right? Then it's like, okay, I need to figure out something. And then I became a major pain in the ass of my bandmates when I brought it to practice. And they're like, oh, here he goes again with his screaming cat guitar noises, because obviously I couldn't intonate for shit at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
That was going to be my question about how difficult that makes it.
Yeah, and it's still a struggle. Don't let's not pretend that it's not still like a daily struggle. But I also realized over time that it really does align with one of my major objectives as a musician, which is always to deliver something to myself and to the audience that they can't get anywhere else. That's been one of my main goals in life for forever. Just maybe just because the people that I was looking up to first, that were my main role models as guitar players, they did that. And I just grew up thinking, well, that's how you do it.
Yep.
If you don't do that, then you're doing it wrong. And now, I mean, it's 2025 and 99.9% of the internet disagrees with me, but it is what it is. So I found out that the fretless guitar really is a major help in this journey of getting deeper and deeper into my own voice and more and more make noises that are characteristic to me, in like, for better or worse.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's great to have a sort of creative vessel that you can use that really becomes a part of your identity. And it's like, I mean, I get in a way like it's sort of comparable to having a completely unusual guitar tuning. If you
Yeah,
tune your guitar in a different way and you don't know any songs that are tuned like that, it's like, okay, now you have to figure this out yourself. You can't just go like E, G, C. Like you got to make
exactly.
your own
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. And fretless guitar is just another end to get there, to get to a unique set of results, right? And it
Yeah.
can also be other things. But I do think, looking back over the last 20 years of working with this instrument now, that there's so much untapped potential in it. So many scenarios have not been tested on fretless guitar. So over the years, I've basically tried to make myself a little bit of a guinea pig, if that's the
Yeah.
word, to try out what can be done. Like for example, I've had this series on YouTube. I'm the world's least successful YouTube guitar player, but I've had this series where I would cover songs on fretless guitar, but I wouldn't cover the song or the guitar parts. I would cover the vocals
On the fretless guitar.
on the fretless guitar, and then
Ah.
basically figure out how to get even closer and closer every time to the qualities of the voice and the phrasing that made this vocal performance what it is. And I've done Iron Maiden, but I've also done Pavarotti, and I've done Devin Townsend. I've done this crazy pop opera singer from Russia called Vitas. I've done Ariana Grande. So yeah,
Oh,
this
that's really
fretless
cool. I'm gonna
guitar
have to
got
check that
around.
out. I like that. I think that's really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a kind of a practical question. So you've clearly got a variety of different creative hats, and you're involved in many aspects of your own music. But I think you make, or you're involved in, recording other people and arranging for other people. And I'm sort of curious because I like to ask a lot of people this that are making music in a sort of relatively independent realm. From a sort of financial point of view, in terms of like having a career in the music world, are you there? And whether you are or not, like what are the things that are actually like you can make money from in this day and age in terms of the music world?
That's a humbling question, isn't it? So I don't know what there means exactly in this day and age. Do I consider myself successful? Yes, because I do what I want to do. Is it a comfortable life? Not in the least. Am I financially secure? Not in the least. And right now, I honestly feel like very close to a burnout, just waking up in the middle of the night thinking about the thousands of euros that I'm in the red trying to make this album the best it can be, and people not pre-ordering the way that I would like them to. But that's the honest answer.
Yeah.
And it's this, and I don't want to make this about like a big rallying cry about musicians not doing well in general. That does come into play because, streaming.
For sure.
What a shit show, man. Like, seriously, at this point, can we please stop having this argument? Like, in general, whether streaming or not is a good thing. It's a terrible thing.
Do you think it has the potential that it could be a good thing if the model was set up in a way that was
yeah,
more considerate to musicians?
for sure. The technology is undeniable. I am not opposed to the technology at all. I'm just opposed to the implementation and to the
Yeah.
extremely post capitalistic way that it's working right now, which is to the detriment of artists in a way that feels unprecedented. And I know there's people who really don't agree with that, saying, "Well, you just don't know how to play this game, and it's a new game with new rules." And I get that, but I'm just look at it this way. Like I have there's somebody on the album who does all the backing vocals, right? Alex is fantastic, and his band is like really on the verge of breaking through right now. They're called Villanova. They're awesome. So in the metalcore space, they're really doing cool things, and they're really gaining traction and recognition now. Now he's a digital native, and he's grown up with social media. And the reason they are breaking through right now and they're having this success and they're about to have their first international stuff and getting recognition from brands and doing really well on Spotify. The reason is that he's really good with social media, and that's awesome. That's really awesome, and so it works for them. But if you're asking me, I'm a guy who makes 60-minute concept albums that take 5 years to make, and have a budget of 30,000 euros for the production. 25 years ago, that would have been 300,000 probably. You know what I mean? Like in the old days. So
yeah, when Madonna was making $3 million videos.
Exactly, right? So for me, this system is the worst because I don't have the capacity to do social media. Like when will I do my 5-year concept album if I do social media, if I do all the things that you have to do to play this game, because this is not a game I'm playing.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that it's not terrible for some people who have adapted to this game, and I recognize that. But also, let's ask ourselves the question that adapting to this game, does that not maybe influence your creative decision making already to the point where
That's a good point.
some of the things that I do are basically off the table? Like if you would look logically at what I just did on Changeling, you'll be like, yeah, just don't. Right? So my point is that this is a new scenario. This is a new reality for musicians that can have advantages for some, but the trade-off to be working in this environment, I think, is not acceptable. Only when we have a system that enables myself to be comfortable and have something come back that's appropriate to the work that I put in, and a band like Alex's and other people who are doing really well in this economy, if both of the sides of these coins are equally seen and heard and supported by the system, then the system is working. If it's just working for some people, no shade to those people at all the power to them. But if it's just working for them, it's a broken system. That's my point.
No, I have to agree. I have to agree with you. Well,
before we move on, I want to hear your perspective on this too.
Well,
what do you think?
These are like topics that I am really interested in exploring in general, because I want to get as broad a picture as I can, get like as good an understanding as I can. And my feelings are pretty similar, I would say, to what you've been expressing. I have a lot of misgivings about Spotify, for example. I can see that it's a great opportunity. I have it myself. I pay the subscription, so I'll listen to music out of convenience that way. But I also am aware that bands and artists don't generally make that much money out of it. So generally, I want to support bands by, even buying digital downloads if I don't particularly want to pay for the postage of having vinyl or having CD. I want to go and see bands where I can. I want to buy merch from them because I recognize that, actually getting stuff directly, whether it's, buying a vinyl or a CD at a show or buying a T-shirt, that's going to go more into the artist's pockets rather than the percentage that they're going to get through streams, or even the percentage they'll get from other channels. So yeah, I think the system is kind of broken. And without wanting to get too political about it, I think if you look at what's happening in America at the moment, one interpretation of that could be capitalism gone insane, and that the fact that we can exist in a world where you can have billionaires and oligarchs basically convincing working class people that the system that they're creating is going to benefit them when it doesn't, and it's just basically hoovering up as much as they possibly can. Yeah. I feel like in a way, Spotify is to a greater or lesser degree a part of that whole equation. It is you're going to get scraps, but somehow we're going to convince you that that's sort of the way it has to be, when there's absolutely no reason why it should be that way.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I do agree with this analysis, and I think that it's just another form of divide and conquer. Like, you are going to fight over the scraps while we sit back and watch the games.
Yeah.
Right? And I was little side tangent here a while ago. I was dating an actress, And I don't know how the situation is anywhere else in the world, but I had never really thought about union representation. And here I was dating this person, and she ran into quite a few challenging scenarios in her work with stage plays and, the powers that be trying to shut down different productions because of COVID and, all sorts of things that an actress experiences, a working actress. And the way that she was supported and could just rally up help and make sure that her wages are fairly, negotiated for her through her union representation just blew my mind back then, because I had never, as a working musician, I had never considered what that does, because nobody has union representation as a musician. And ever since then, it's been in the back of my mind that musicians in general are, I don't know why exactly, but we completely missed the boat on organizing ourselves decades and decades ago. And if we would have organized ourselves in the 60s, the situation would be completely different. And I'm convinced that we wouldn't have this Spotify discussion right now if that was the case. But because there is zero unity between musicians on that level, we don't have anything to bargain with except for our art, which is only as valuable as the people paying for it.
Yep.
And that's a horrifying scenario.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I feel like once you brought that up about the union aspect, I thought this rings a bell that I've heard someone else talk about that, but I haven't heard that many people talk about it. I think that's I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to explore that with more people in the future.
Yeah,
Now
please do.
You have just given me a topic that's now going to become, I have a series of sort of like music business related topics that I tend to deploy depending on who I'm talking to. And that's definitely going to become one of them now, the potential unionization of music.
For sure. And I only got, into this topic just because of this more or less random experience with somebody else in my life.
Yep.
And it also made me realize that as musicians, we are so busy fighting for survival and, just getting up our own asses, being so much into our own trip that we don't see the bigger picture. And I think a lot of that is reflected in music on a cultural level. Like I don't want to call it narcissism, but there's a little bit of navel gazing in music that's like inherent in it. How much popular music, or even when we're talking like widespread metal music, is really making bigger points like that, like trying to change the system, making points about what we all could do better to build a better system. Like how much really? Right? I mean, I am kind of sitting in a glass house throwing stones because I'm putting out an album that is not in the least political on that level. But I'm just saying, when
but you're out here, you're having that conversation.
Yeah, I think the platform that we have as musicians and talking to people and putting ideas into their minds, sharing ideas, it's getting smaller and smaller. And as long as we have a little bit of it still, I think we would be well advised to organize ourselves and call for a unity and a safety net for artists and musicians, especially in the light of the upcoming or already in progress AI takeover.
Definitely. Yep. Absolutely.
It's maybe our last chance to do that.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Instead of infighting and letting ourselves be pitted against each other, letting ourselves be, I don't know, distracted by meaningless genre differences or, this bullshit.
Yeah. Food for thought, indeed, as you take a drink from your skull again.
It kind of makes me think of, you remember Craig Ferguson with the Late Late Show?
Oh, yes, I do remember. But what was the mug that he had?
He had the snake cup. And then he would just awkwardly drink out of the snake cup and use that as kind of a lead-in for some gag. So this is my version of that.
Your version of the snake. It's pretty cool. So thinking about the album, which will be released at the time that I put this episode out. So I know Season of Mist have got North American and European distribution. The album is going to be out on 2 different splatter vinyl editions, I believe, both with 2 discs, well, 2 records, 2 vinyl discs. It's going to be out on CD as well. People will be able to digitally download it from Bandcamp. It will be on the streaming services as well, I suppose, in terms
Yeah,
of just the getting it out there. In terms of people keeping track of what you're doing, I'm not sure if you have an active website or if you
I do.
use. Okay, what's
Yeah.
your website?
It's called thefountainhead.de, and it's terrible and it's not nice to look at, and I never update it, but it does exist.
Okay. And so is that the best place to direct people towards in terms of upcoming shows, etc.?
I guess the best way to just get updated about all of that would be, well, actually, now that you mention it, no, because I never updated. Social media, as much as I loathe it, I take
Yeah.
part in it. I do have an Instagram. I do have a TikTok. And I do have a Facebook. So if you find me, Tom Fountainhead, on either of those platforms, then you will also have access to these updates. But yeah, in general, now with Changeling, I honestly have to say that I still have to figure out how to streamline this whole operation a little bit more in the future. And I don't know, there's no shame in saying I haven't figured all of this out. I'm just making the best music I can possibly make at some point. And then the rest, I'm not the world's greatest at. What can I say? So one step at a time.
Yeah. I have probably very similar mixed feelings to you about social media. I try to get what I can out of it without getting sucked into its black void.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Yeah,
It very much is. Well, look, Tom, it's been a super pleasure to talk to you. I've really appreciated it. It was
likewise.
very insightful and enjoyable for me. I've really enjoyed listening to the album, and I hope
Thank you.
that you will continue to get a good reception for it. And yeah, I hope you're going to get some good shows coming up in the near future.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for your German introduction. And this was a very, very pleasurable interview.
Super.
The Skull Cup salutes you.
Tom, from one Tom to another, thank you very much.
Bye bye.
for so long that I has faded to a mere threadbare nexus of vacuous